their study said the Negro was a second-class citizen, didn't have the brain power of the white, didn't have the moral caliber of the white, therefore physically qualified. So do support area, fine. Anything technical, won't work. They claim they've studied it. But to me, they overlooked what the blacks that went to France and fought in World War I, didn't look at what Bessie Coleman did for the country in the aviation world and things like that. But that report was sent to Washington, and Washington bought it. That's why we didn't have the opportunity when the war broke out. But it took some pressure and the need, because they finally realized we've got to use everybody. We can't just use part of the population. And given the opportunity, we proved that whole study wrong. But it's amazing how many people still didn't buy it and still apply that. So to me, well, I've never studied and still don't understand how it is that we have so many with the attitude that because of happenstance of birth, you have limited capability or qualities or so on. I think it's also a challenge to our school systems. Unfortunately, the best schools are supported by people with money. Same school district and same school board, but every school in many of our cities are nowhere equal and similar. Now, what does that mean? Some citizens aren't getting the direction the education shown they should have and need. But that's why I say we human beings are our own worst enemy. When you look at all that's taking place and what can be done, what ought to be done is a different story than what does happen in so many areas of our country. But that's just my evaluation without really a broad expanse or any deep study or anything else, but something that you realize just out of the experience that you had, out what you see and what you do, and I probably ought to not be talking without more education and the ability to.
90-some years of education as far as we're concerned.
Well, I guess you can say experience does give you, and observation give you a little bit. Thank you for that thought.
How do you think that your experiences being a Tuskegee Airman helped further the civil rights movement?
You know, we didn't look at it as a civil rights action, but our performance and under the leadership of Ben Davis Jr. Established some groundwork that perhaps led to the civil rights action, but we weren't considering that at the time. I think I mentioned it earlier. You know, the country had come out of 10 years of depression, and it didn't change segregation, but everybody had the opportunity. The job buildups in the industrial support for the air effort, enlistments were open. So it was an attitude of being supportive of what was taking place. And as I say, it took the civil rights movement to take, we established a change in some attitudes that allowed the Air Force to integrate. But they really led the country in integration, but that still, it took the civil rights action, though, to open motels, restaurants, and that type of thing. In the early years, I've done a lot of travel, but many motels you couldn't stay at, many eating emplacements you couldn't enter. So it's something to consider when you look at what does civil rights really mean. And as I say, we didn't look at it that we were helping civil rights. We were just glad to be able to serve our country.
How is like seeing that Tuskegee Airmen was a big spark of military aviation? How like as in seeing the military aviation world today, like changed, made it a bigger viewpoint of how you saw it back then with all of the segregation?
That's an interesting question because you get involved with politics and circumstances that you have no control over, and concepts and attitudes. Some cases they've changed, some cases they haven't. Sometimes you look at where there's promotion opportunities or assignment opportunities. There are elements out of your control, but still impact what's taking place. And I can remember after the Air Force integrated in July of '49, for years we got better assignments overseas than we did here at home. But that's the politics of the circumstance and time, not anything else that you could put your finger on. Some of those things still haven't changed in a way. There are limitations. I can remember in the late 50s was one of my, I think my second assignment at Richards Gabar Air Base. I was thinking I'd like to get out of military flying and go commercial. They didn't want me or women.
Right.
Took lawsuits in the early 60s before that changed, but by that time, again, on the other hand, I stayed in service because I couldn't have written a script for better assignments. But you know, how this happened, like after Korea, I went to the Philippines. I commanded the 44th Fighter Bomber Squadron for 2 years overseas. I didn't get a command assignment here at home until 1972.
Wow. Yeah, we get asked quite often, you know, with our Red Tail Scholarship, why is there only 2% of black pilots in the military and in commercial aviation now? And I think it can be traced back to the end of World War II. There's just nobody hiring.
I fully agree. And it's also interesting to me, they talk about we're facing a shortage of commercial and other pilots. But there's no established school like it was established to provide the pilots to support World War II. Well, does that take somebody with a lot of money don't mind establishing a school? I guess the question is, why should we have a shortage?
Right.
When the opportunity to train and provide, if it's needed, we ought to be about doing it. But I guess the question is, who's going to do it? You know? But that's why I say, unfortunately, government activity is a compromise because politics, really, I say there's no win because compromise doesn't provide winning. That's why we still got a divided Korea. Vietnam wasn't much better than what's going on. We don't even know what the full outcome is, although we can say we're winning. Winning what? For whom? Lots of questions to throw out when you look at it from the political point of view.
It gets confusing when you bring politics into it.
For sure.
I have a question.
Yes.
From being a Tuskegee Airman and, you know, first learning how to fly and being a student pilot, I guess what was your experience? I imagine it was pretty hard, and what kept you pushing forward through that?
Just the love of flying, plus doing something that was needed. You know, we're all citizens and Americans. Just a lot of folks don't look at it like that way. You know, I can remember even working after retirement from the service and had a young officer white as my assistant. I was managing Kansas City downtown airport. The worker comes in to do something and walks up to my assistant, saying, we're here to talk about something, saying, you don't want to talk to me, the manager's sitting over there. Well, we didn't do business with them. Just because the attitude, in other words, that we put so much on race rather than on ability and training and education. That's sad. For so many times, unfortunately, I can walk. You or I can walk in the door and, oh, we're a black person, not Charles or whatever your name is or what you represent, and that's still, unfortunately, a big part of our problem in the country. And then, as we just said too, unfortunately, we've got a lot of shortage in areas, but who's got the money or the resources to provide the training if that doesn't exist anymore? Yeah, I think I've also said to others, for me, for too long, our politics has allowed advancement to be measured just in increasing bottom line dollars. Quality went overseas, in television, cars, you name it, and we've got people wanting work. Well, who do we blame but ourselves and the political leadership that allows that type of thing to happen?
Colonel McGee, this is Airman Sankey. He just took his AFOQT today.
Oh, congratulations and thank you. Pleasure. Nice to shake a hand and share. And
So I have another question for you.
Yes.
What was your most exciting mission or assignment when you were, I guess, a part of the Tuskegee Airmen?
oh, I think I mentioned to somebody asked me that question earlier. Of all my flying experiences, World War II was primarily what we would call the air superiority phase of flying. My experience in Korea, interdiction and ground support. Never dealt with MiGs because they weren't down the trees where we were. Vietnam, my experience was tactical intelligence. No weapons. Speed was our defense, but we were gathering all times of day, night, all weather type information for intelligence gathering. So each phase was different. So I was just enjoying flying. I really don't have a favorite from that aspect, and just glad to have had that experience in all of those phases of support. And now your flying is much different than mine, because I had to fly over and see and maybe could drop a bomb on the runway. You can go over and have a target, never see it, but put bombs on it, that type of thing. Completely different approach. We look at the drone world of today. What a difference. And it's still growing of what they're doing. We don't know if there's drones flying over Russia right now in that area, wherever, in fact, around the world. So we're part of a world environment that wasn't even thought about back in my early flying day, and that's another challenge that you have in today's work and effort. I think I told somebody else, good Lord wishes everybody 80, some a little more, some less. Just can't afford to be around any longer. Couldn't face it. So there's a challenge to we as human beings on this earth that we find ourselves in that's sometimes beyond comprehension, but only because we don't focus on that background and that future. And there are too many folks not realizing what we're doing. If folks don't believe in climate change, you begin to wonder where they get their training. Because if you look at things, because I've just seen it, we look at the weather just across our country. if you go back and pull out maps and look where the jet stream and the push out of the Canadian area over the last 20 years, it's changed. Pushes much farther south than it did 20 years ago. That's what's affected the weather. We got areas never seen the rain or the things that are happening. And I guess on the other side of it, it also makes us realize that we human beings are a small aspect on this earth, and when you look at what the world is and what they're finding out there in space miles away and all. I know I often have fun with talking to middle school, in some cases high school kids, and I say, everybody say, we know we're planning to go to Mars. Oh yeah, they all know about it. But I just say, guess who's going to make the trip? I said, when they get all the planning done, the planners are going to be too old. It's going to be one of you sitting here that's going to make that trip. So we've got many challenges beyond comprehension. I think we can certainly give God thanks and so on that in our country we still enjoy freedoms and so on that are from around the world. Folks say, I want to be like that or be a part of it, and we should certainly be thankful.
If you could relive one thing from your days as a Tuskegee Airman, what would it be?
Well, I don't know. You know, but it's there are so many things interesting, and the best example I can give you, my mother died in a sister's birth, and I was just a little over a year old. What would my life have been had she lived? I have no idea what life could be. All of us face circumstances like that. That some little difference, we don't know. So is there an answer to that? Should you know? I think there's some things we don't know you don't want to know. But that's not an easy answer. But the other side, sometimes I ask, well, how'd you face segregation? And I've given it this way. As a little kid, I learned from church activity, hey, treat other people like you want to be treated, period. A little bit later, I had this opportunity to be a scout. On my honor, I will do my best to do my duty to God, to country, to help others at all times, and keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight, and live a life being trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, reverent. Got anything to beat it? I tell you, if everybody in our country lived by the Scout Oath and laws, we'd have a different country. So it's some things along the way that the circumstances allowed me to participate in. I still don't have an answer for that, because I say, had my mother lived what our family life and my dad's life would have been, I don't have that answer. And I'm sure you can look back in your experience, and a lot of part of what you've experienced, you don't have the answer, but it's you and what you do and what you accomplish in your lifespan.
In a time of drone pilots and, virtual reality, in your opinion, what's the importance of having people physically flying airplanes? Like, what is the value that it gives to human beings?
I don't know that I have an answer to that question. It happens that it took a human being to design the aircraft, and what they designed, the Wright brothers down on North Carolina deciding that man could fly like a bird. No, we can't, but we try. Because if you watch birds fly, life's amazing. Because birds can fly, and it looks like they're going so fast in the wind and stop on a branch of any tree they desire to stop on. Hey, we're a long way from really flying like a bird can. I don't have a full answer for it, but that's part of it.
Would you agree, sir, that it could be considered a double-edged sword to not having someone in the seat versus having someone in the seat? Sometimes I think if, yeah, it's there's a lot of advantages, but for me, I would think a disadvantage would be, it's more desensitizes,
Yeah.
You could take yourself out of that
Well,
situation and.
I'm not sure that I want to be a part of the flying world when it's all hands off. But flying's instant. I personally believe that those two accidents that happened recently in the airlines that they're talking about has to do with training. My son is a retired airline captain and got rehired by Boeing to help bring the Japanese and one of the other countries' folks on board with the Dreamliner and the 777. His early experience had to do in Japan. Their circumstance of raising people, a junior never questions an elderly. That makes a difference. He said in the cockpit, the pilot says, flaps 20 degrees. Co-pilot says, flaps 20 degrees. When he gets through, he turns to the pilot, flaps are 20 degrees. How much time has passed and so on while they talk to each other, because he can't just act without being told, and with the act completed, he's got the report. And my son said this in training. There's a fire out in the wing. They get out the checklist to do what you do in case of fire in the wing. He adds, now the right engine's on fire, but I haven't completed the checklist on the fire in the wing. I do what I'm told first. I've got to finish that task before I can do a more serious task. Is that the way we think? Or should, we've got to do things different. So these are challenges I see to whatever your level or whatever your work or so on, there are challenges like that. And it differs around the world. Yeah. I think the freedoms and joys that we have and enjoy here in America are tops in many ways in the world, but they're not the only way, but they're still something we can be proud of, and so on. I think I told somebody we were talking about a joyful flight, and I think in my answer, and I can still see it, in South America, they look at the Southern Star. North America, we look at the North Star. Same meaning, but a different part of the world, completely. And it's that type of thing I think we have to realize. We have a place and a part of it, but it's not the whole. Long way from it. That makes life very interesting. But to me, I'd put it this way too. And back, it costs too much now, but back when a lot of my flying, if there was a plane in commission, you wanted to go get some night flying, go down, get in the plane and go fly. Can't do.
I love to do that.
Can't do that anymore. But I remember getting in a plane. This was early jet age. Sunset, climb up to 40,000 feet, literally see the sunset again. Still flying, stars come out, the heavens above. But what it made me realize, and I've often said to others, we human beings are one small aspect in a mighty grand universe, and we should never forget that. Indeed. The last part of my early growing up, in later years, I joined a fraternity, and one of the precepts was that if you're going to be first of all, you must first become a servant of all. But that's what it means. Are you mentoring somebody coming along behind that needs it? You know, we've got a problem today. There's youngsters on the street need mentoring. Of course, you've got to be very careful approaching them today. But they need it, and we can't overlook that. Many, many youngsters out there need the mentoring, just to tap on the back that believe that they can, desire to improve themselves. Just so many things that if we aren't careful, we are going to be the lost, because the youngsters are, as I tell them, you're the future. And I enjoy talking to youngsters and speaking to them, but I just tell them, remember, I always say it with their parents listening, what's happening in the country 20 years from now is what you're going to be doing. We need to mentor the youngsters, and as we mentioned a little earlier, so many of our schools are not keeping them up to date to where they ought to be. So, but hey, the sun's shining and we're up and in it. So we got to keep a smile on our face and keep about what we've chosen to do, and that's the way it's been for me. And so when somebody asks me how it all come about, I say, as long as God's willing, it does happen. What happens in our life is certainly lots of help along the way, but there's still one above that still the master of the universe.
Could you tell us a little bit about the standards and expectations of excellence that happened through the Tuskegee Airmen experiment?
Well, a couple of things. I think it was important that there were folks who believed in the opportunity and helped make it possible. The first commander, white commander of Tuskegee Army Airfield, wasn't supportive. You know, he didn't want a guard at the gate have a gun on him because he didn't want a white person from Tuskegee coming out to visit the base and be faced with a black with a gun. How and why he got changed, I don't know. I haven't figured it out. But fortunately, he didn't last very long, and the gentleman took his place, didn't change segregation, but he believed in the opportunity and did those things that assured that training continued. So we had excellent training out of the Southeast Flying Training Command, which that's good because that could have been quite different. At that time, the town of Tuskegee was no friend. We dealt with Tuskegee Institute and Tuskegee Army Airfield. We went through town very carefully because the sheriff wasn't a friend. But you face things like that knowing that the goal and what you're trying to achieve is worthwhile. And you move ahead and you don't let those adversities rule your thoughts or guide your actions. So I don't know whether I've said enough. Life is interesting.
What kind of mentor was Chief Anderson?
Chief Anderson loved to fly, and if you don't know his history, he taught himself to fly in the early 30s. He loved airplanes for some reason, went out and glad to war somebody's airplane and so on, but nobody would teach him to fly. he had support and got enough money to buy an airplane and taught himself to fly. He taxied the airplane around the airport several times and finally one day got enough determination to keep on going. But he loved flying and loved to pass it on to other people all of his life. So probably when he died, he probably had over 60,000 hours of flying. But it's because he loved it and he loved to show and share it with others throughout. So Chief, I've forgotten, he was at a school when, if you recall, they established just ahead of the war build-up civilian pilot training program. It was located at colleges around the country. He was the chief pilot at one of the schools and eventually took over at Tuskegee Institute. Tuskegee Institute had a very successful pilots program and actually going into what they called the second phase, which was training instructors. So, hey, we can't fly, but guess who taught me to fly? Black pilot in their civilian pilot training program, because even though the Army said we can't fly, they were allowed to contract the primary phase of military training to the civilian pilot training school. Tuskegee Institute set up and got the contract, and that's what required Moulton Field to provide the primary training for this experiment, 99 Pursuit Squadron, that the Army started out with. Chief was there and led that program, and so he inspired, just out of his enthusiasm and loving flying, many people. And certainly Tuskegee Institute was fortunate to have a person of his thoughts and caliber to be a part of the program, because who knows what would have happened had that not been possible. As I mentioned, I think too, a little earlier, of the now called Tuskegee Airmen, the first were really mechanics trained at the technical school Sanude Field, Rantoul, Illinois, because a pilot graduating from college or getting his training in the civilian pilot training program went next door and said, I want to be an Army pilot. And he said, we have no black mechanics.
If people remember your legacy for one thing, what would it be?
I think it's got to be more than one thing. Because even if you have the desire for something, if the circumstances aren't there for you to proceed in it, it won't work. It takes more than just the desire. It takes the circumstance to place that desire in. But certainly there's the belief that you can succeed. I think very important the knowledge that you must get the education to support that belief along the way. From the experience, I don't know that there's just one phase that you would rely on, because it takes support in any area of endeavor. You can't do it alone, but you alone must have the belief and desire that you can. And of course, getting the education so that, I think it was Chappie James that said, you don't want to be in position, door of opportunity opens and you have to say, wait a minute, I need to go back and do something or get certain accomplishment or that type of thing. That's not an easy answer to the question, but shares in part of it.
When I was in basic training, they asked us the question every day, are you ready to join the ranks of the world's greatest Air Force? It wasn't until I got here until I realized that I was ready to join the ranks of the world's greatest Air Force. So what did you experience that made you say, okay, yes, I'm ready to join the ranks of the world's greatest Air Force? Oh, you were Army. I'm sorry. I am so sorry.
No,
What made you feel like you were ready to join the Army? What experience was like, okay, yes, this is it. This is what I need to do. This is what I want to do.
that's not an easy question in my mind, for at least for me to answer. It was the total circumstance of what was taking place in the country in my mind at that time. And I think I'd mentioned earlier, the country coming out of depression, there were opportunities, well, even to say back then, to the point of folks saying a car in every driveway. Well, you didn't think of something like that today. There's probably 3 cars and one out on the street today. So it was attitude and desire based on the circumstances. And that's certainly in everything we're doing today. The circumstances are different. And there's so many examples we can give, because hardly any metropolitan area that you can go to, there aren't road jams. But it's the circumstance. It's what we built and what we're doing that make that possible. What's going to be in tomorrow? I don't have the answer. I think I was talking earlier, I think unfortunately so many things are going on now is very difficult for the middle class person. Costs keep going up. Why? Well, you can question most of them as needed. I think I mentioned earlier, we let quality go overseas in many products. We no longer build here at home. Now we're paying the price for that, because to get it back, it costs a little bit more. Not an easy answer.
Sir, how does it feel to know that you are one of the giants whose shoulders we built the modern force upon? And what are some of your hopes for the future of the military?
Well, I don't see myself in what we call as heroes and all of this. I'd rather look at it as disloyal citizens and hope everybody would see life in America in that way. Folks, say, oh, you're a hero, you're this. We met a circumstance at the time, and I'm not sure that if somebody said, give me the definitions of heroes, that would all be a part of it. But it is in a way, and folks say that, but it's a little hard to put into words this attitudes and circumstances that my grandparents' parents, my grandparents, and my parents are all American. And I come along. Why am I not American? There's attitudes out there that dictate, things like that. I think that's very unfortunate. We should all just be citizens of America and willing to, as you are, to provide support for country's needs and direction. Hopefully that day will come. I'm not sure. Because like I said, now we invite people, welcome into the country, but don't even insist that they learn English. But life goes on, and I think we each must determine how we face it and what our actions and so on will say to others that we're sharing with of what it means to be an American. I think that's all I could leave you with. It's up to each individual.
Well, it's a good challenge to leave us with.
Yes, thank you.
I got a quick question for you.
Yes.
Given how automated today's planes have become and more technologically advanced, would you prefer to fly in today's era or your era?
Well, I'm not ready for the hands-off things yet, whether it's the car or but the airplane. But that technology is with us. What that means, I don't have the answer. I'm sure some of you don't, but some of you are going to be faced with getting the answer as time goes on. So it's a new phase and new opportunities and new circumstances that I think we're each faced with as life goes on. Mine and what well, it was almost like how, I'm sure you don't even think about it, but when I was a very young kid, stores didn't open on Sunday. All of you probably faced life and have no idea what it would be like if you decided you want something, you couldn't go get it on Sunday. How much does that change life and circumstances along the way? So we each face those things along the way, and hopefully we each do as a citizen those things that will preserve the good things that we want that should exist and should be as good examples for the young people coming behind and that type of thing. It's a lot to think about.
Ready for a break?
I was going to say, what's next on the agenda? I appreciate the opportunity to share with you. Hope it's been reasonably helpful and in some ways challenging, because the world that's still ahead of you is certainly a lot different than the world I faced when I was your age, for most of you, and be for sure. But I appreciate the opportunity to share with you, and very thrilled with what you're doing in today's life and so on for our country, but just the chance to share with you and see it and share some thoughts with you is, well, keep me out of the rocking chair.
And we appreciate so much you coming to visit us and spending the time with us, and especially the younger generation here, and passing on your wisdom.
Yeah.
We're gonna need all the help we can get.
Yeah, thank you for the thought, and as I say, I wish everyone the very best as you face the challenges that are ahead of you, and do set examples in the areas that you're working and proceeding. So thank you so much, and we'll be glad to share.